Hello everyone, welcome to another Flesh and Blood video. The Pro Tour is happening right now, since I'm recording Sunday, well not right now, in like an hour and a half. The top 8 should be playing. Sadly there's no ninjas in the top 8, but I think it's like, what is it, 2 Dories, 3 KOs, a Dromai, maybe 4 KOs. There's 2 Dorinthias. I think that's a big thing. Dorinthia, Axorinthia is pretty good. So we'll look at that one week when we do the original heroes, the Dory, the Bravo, them. But for now, I'm going to be showing you this deck that I've been playing a lot this set, which is going to be Katsu, the Wanderer. Not because we saw a bunch of the Mistveil stuff, which has a really cool ninja hero that I'm going to play and talk to you guys about a lot, which I can't do the early thoughts video yet because I do want to see more cards. We don't know what Chi is. I want to know what Chi is before I do that video. But for now, we're going to just keep going with the deck list, talking about probably the deck I've had the most fun with this set and what I'll probably play until the end of Heavy Hitters, Katsu the Wanderer. A deck that I have played for a long time. Just like Reinar and Icelander, Katsu sits up as one of my top 3 favorite decks. So I think that this list honestly is pretty nice. Now there is a distinction. A lot of Katsus right now are on the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. I am not. I'm currently on Mask of Momentum only, and there's a reason for this I will talk about. First, of course, Katsu the Wanderer. If you don't know what he does, the first time an attack action you control hits each turn, you can discard a card of cost 0 to search your deck for a card with combo, banish it, and you may play it this turn. That's sort of how the whole deck works. We want to land one hit and go into other hits. I've talked about it in the past. I believe I have a Katsu combos video for when Dishonor came out and mainly Bonds of Ancestry, which probably needs to be updated, but I'm sure there's other people that posted guides on that before. But Mask of Momentum. Why am I playing the Mask of Momentum instead of the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx? And the reason for that is actually pretty simple. I prefer the more consistent game plan. I don't want to play that bursty deck because even though it's good into things like KO and other stuff like that, I wanted more deck slots for other matchups. Of course, that list can also be good into Victor, one of Katsu's worst matchups, but I think personally this list has a little bit better just ability to play into Guardian, because if you're on the more consistent plan, it stops them from having just turn after turn disruption, because if you're ever threatening Mask, they have to block it, so their hands are going to get worse. If they don't, and you're not disrupted that turn, you're just going to go in, and they're going to end up losing a lot more. So Mask of Momentum in those matchups can just take more out of them, and into the aggro matchups, it actually makes them think about using their cards to block, so they don't take more damage, which is good for you, because you won't have to block as much since they're throwing less back at you. Of course, there's upside to the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. Mask of the Pouncing Lynx adds 4 insane burst turns, getting you extra bonds, getting you a double Dishonor a lot easier, all those things like Tenacity, Salt the Wound. But personally, I just prefer the Mask of Momentum. Harmonized Kadachis as the weapons, because what other weapon are you going to play on Ninja? Heart and Crossstrap in the main board slot. We have Tunic here, just most matchups that go fast. Pretty much if a matchup is less than 6 turns, you want the Heart and Crossstrap. Breaking Scales, because you wouldn't leave home without it on Katsu. This card's just so good. It's always a threat and +1, makes your opponent overblock so much. And then Breeze Rider Boots, so we can get some insane combo lines off, makes multi-bonds turns easier, lets us set up For just like early game, if we're on the Mugenshi, we can go for a triple Lord of Wind, just to get a bunch of extra damage. Before, I was never really a fan of Breeze Rider boots, and I'm still not so much a fan of them, but right now I feel like the one block is just super important. So building a deck slanted in a way that can actually use them well definitely is an upside. Looking at the deck, Katsu, of course, is a deck based on attack actions, so we're going to talk about the not attack actions first. I think that's pretty fair. This is a 51 card main board. I'll talk about the sideboard plans when we get to the sideboard. I know I'm talking a little fast here, but that's because when I know a deck more, I tend to know what I'm saying a lot easier, and I know this deck very well. Not like the other decks where I test them for a little bit and decide on a good list. This is a list I play week after week. Starting with Ancestral Empowerment, this is another card you wouldn't leave home without. It's just a 3-block red attack reaction. You get +1 and draw a card. It's just a free +1, which is very important in this deck because if your opponent ever perfect blocks something, say they just put a 3 in front of a Be Like Water, you can punish them by pumping it up with Ancestral, replacing itself, getting the hit off Be Like Water, which will trigger your Katsu. Maybe you even triggered your Mask. You just get so much free value off of Ancestral Empowerment. It's such a good card. And if you don't ever play it, it's still a 0 to discard to Katsu. 3 Art of War. This card very strong. Some lists are down to 2 Art of War simply just because it doesn't block and it costs 1. It can be a little awkward to play in some situations, but this card just lets you be so aggressive that I find myself wanting 3 most of the time. And then 1 copy of Ancestral Harmony. You may think, why do we have only 1 copy of this card? Well, because it's a 16th blue. That's pretty much it. The only 2 times I've played this card, I did not hit a card with combo, but there is times where it is very good, which is why it warrants its 1 of inclusion, but mainly it is a blue block 3 that costs 0. That is pretty much it. Next, moving on to the attacks. The main combo line, of course, being starting with Surging Strike. We are playing 6 copies, 3 red and 3 yellow. Blue just doesn't do enough damage to compete. Whelming Gust Wave. We are playing 3 red, 1 yellow, and 3 blue. The blues are a blue block 3-0. The reds are the main things we want to be grabbing off of Katsu. And the 1 yellow is here specifically for an extra copy. We can set up bigger bonds turns easier. Even with Breeze Rider boots, we can set up a Mugenshi just by having the 1 extra whelming. I do like the 1 of inclusion in the list. Then we either go into the Mugenshis, which are sideboards, so we're not going to talk about them, or mainly this Bonds of Ancestry. I'm on 5, 3 red, and 2 yellow. The reason for this is because this is our main combo piece. We want to throw these to grab Dishonors, Flusterfists, 100 Winds, any other combo card, even Descendants if we have another Bonds, to just create large turns. This is kind of the card that just makes Katsu insanely good, and I'm glad it's here, because honestly Katsu wouldn't be as good without it. And of course we can't talk about Bonds without talking about Descendant Gust Wave. This is a card that also combos off of Surging Strike. It's just a free 0 for 5, so it's just really good damage, and you need it for your Dishonor. We're on 4, 3 red, and 1 yellow. Then, finally, the last real Surging Strike combo line in the deck, because Lord of Wind is really never live, is Dishonor. Dishonor is a 0 for 2. It has 3 block. Very good. It has combo off of Bonds of Ancestry to get +2 power, making it a 0 for 4, which is great. The main effect, though, is that second one. When this hits a hero, if you control Surging Strike, Descendant Gust Wave, and Bonds of Ancestry, that hero loses all of their abilities for the rest of the game. This is a threat that your opponent always has to think about. If you ever throw Surging into Descendant, your opponent suddenly can't block anymore because they have to save cards to make sure they don't get Dishonored. Of course, in some matchups, it doesn't really matter. Victor, I don't think, is going to care, and like OG Dash has no hero ability. But in the matchups like Levia, into matchups like Dromai, maybe even Prism, if you can get it off and they don't have an Angel, Dishonor is just an immediate win if you ever hit with it, and get that silence ability it has. The last Surging Strike line card is Lord of Wind. I'm not going to read it here. This is just like an anti-fatigue card, but these are main board because they're a blue block 3. It becomes an anti-fatigue card with the help of Mugenshi release, but we'll talk about that more when we talk about the sideboard. The rest of the deck is filled with other helpers / other combo cards we can get off Bonds of Ancestry. Be Like Water is another starter. This is better than Blue Surging Strike because it costs 1 to get its effect. Yes, it needs to hit, but it's still a 0 for 3, so it's better than a 2 for 3. 6 Flusterfist, 3 red and 3 blue. The blue is in here because they're blue block 3s. That cost 0, and the red's in here because they're just good 0 for 4 Chain Enders. You can never be mad by just bonzing for this if you're on a Surging Whelming instead of a Surging Descendant. So this is just a good thing to end your turn with. Just hit for 4 damage. And then finally we have 400 Winds, 3 red, 1 yellow, and 3 Winds of Eternity. The 100 Winds are here because they're just 0 for 3s. With Go Again, they're really good. The 1 yellow is in here because it's an extra 4th copy. If this is ever in your yard, you can banish this one to Bonds to get a red. And if when you run out of the reds, you can still get the 1 yellow, and it's really not that bad. Winds of Eternity is here because it's a blue block 3, and of course it combos with the 100 Winds to shuffle a little more into your deck. Something that you really can't hate on. With that all out of the way, let's go take a look at the sideboard. Before we talk about the main cards, let's talk about the rest of the equipment suite. Tunic for games that go more than 6 turns. Think your Guardians, think your Illusionists, anything you can't immediately kill. And then 2 Arcane Barrier, Tide Flippers, and Arcane Lantern. Whenever you need at least 1 AB, you'll always go in with the Tide Flippers, because into Rune Blades, Double Kodachi is still pretty nice, and then into Wizard, you'll add in the Lantern as well, because if you're ever throwing Double Kodachis into Kano, you're probably losing the game. Talking about the rest of the sideboard, of course, we need to add 9 cards, and we have some pretty good numbers for that. In most case scenarios, we'll be adding in the Mugenshi releases, the Enlightened Strikes, and then either the CNCs or the 2 double strikes and the Razor Reflex. This is for our standard normal matchups. Think KO, think mirrors. Decks that you kind of just want to race down. The reason for these is E-Strike is just a good 0 for 7, or it's a 0 for 5 Go Again. It's just a good card. It also has 3 block. Mugenshis, because landing a Mugenshi in the aggro matchups can convert into 6 or more damage with the searching of all the Lord of Winds. And also then it would get the Lord of Winds out of your deck, which you don't want to draw them late. And then the double strikes can threaten more mask triggers, and also Razor's pretty nice. And then the CNCs can threaten their arsenal depending on the matchup. You'll go with one or the other. In 2 matchups, we'd actually care about blocking. Think a matchup like Azuri or Arachne. We're going to be going a little more defensive. You only really need 3 D-Reacts in that matchup. Into Azuri, I would prefer Reinforce the Line, because this still lets us block out CNCs. This still lets us block out from Isolates really, really well, since it's not a defense reaction that can get stopped. And if we're going to be using a D-React on those cards, we're probably putting another card in front of it anyway. If you did want to go up more, you could go up the Flicks as well, but I personally don't. We don't want CNC for that matchup because they don't really care about their arsenal, so we bring in E-Strike so we can get a good 2-card handoff. And then, of course, our choice of Mugenshis so we can try to burst them 1 turn, or double strikes Razor so we can try to threaten more mask triggers. Into Azalea, a matchup that is pretty difficult. I will talk about Guardian separately as well. But into Azalea, we do want the Command and Conquers. We also want D-Reacts. Azalea is fine blocking with 1 card to shut off our masks, so the double strikes won't be that strong. We could think about Razor Reflex though, which is actually pretty good with these 2 Sync Blues. Flick Flack into Azalea isn't the best thing we could be looking for, because Azalea generally only throws 1 arrow, and if they're throwing multiple arrows off like a Bolton shot, yes, blocking the Bolton shot's great, but they probably have another way to reload in a lot of situations. So, I mean, yeah, you can get the 2 extra block then, but I'd rather just save the D-React for whatever else they're going to throw at me. Which is why into Azalea, I personally consider 3 CNC just to disrupt their arsenal. They're an arsenal-based deck. 3 reinforce the line because it can't be stopped by some of their effects. And then 2 Sync Belows alongside the 1 Razor Reflex just so we can pump through that extra damage. E-Strike is considerable. If you think you're going to get red in the ledger a lot, you can bring this in instead. That's generally what I go for a lot of the time, is I bring in CNC, E-Strike, and Reinforce. But if you didn't want the more aggression, you wanted to be a little more defensive, the Syncs definitely help. Mugenshi isn't a card I normally bring into that matchup because a lot of their disruption can just hamper what Mugenshi actually wants to do, so I don't end up bringing it in. Finally is your slower matchups. Think your Guardians that aren't Betsy, or if you know they're trying to fatigue you on Betsy. But any slower Guardian matchup, I kind of just bring the whole board in. Everything has a reason to come into those matchups. CNC can threaten their arsenal and take 2 cards out of their hand. Double Strike is a way we can get bonus mass triggers and make them spend more cards or equipment. E-Strike is good on a turn we had to block. Flick Flack, Reinforce, and Sync Blow are all really good since they have large disruptive effects that we want to block all or most of. Razor's great because it can pump over a block, and because these decks might end up trying to fatigue us, we need Mugenshi release to not die to that fatigue. So into Victor mainly, I do end up bringing everything in. You might think it can hurt having all these cards, but running 60 into Victor could just be a death sentence, because Victor's numbers are high enough to where you have to block them at some point, and Victor has enough defense to where they're not spending every card to try to stop you, so they could just sit there and not die, and you just run out of cards and lose. Because, yes, into those slow matchups, Kodachis are great. They generally will never block Kodachis. You'd have to go 20 turns with them to actually make Kodachis be lethal at that point, so you need a plan to actually get other damage through, i.e. Double Strike. Sometimes E-Strikes can hit them. Trying to land a Mugenshi turn, especially with your Razor. Using D-Reacts to block to save more cards. Victor is your hardest matchup, and I think it's something you do need to learn. Bravo is another hard matchup. Mainly your hard matchups we want to have plans for. The other matchups, the aggro matchups, you generally tend to win because they don't want to block you, and blocking is the way to beat Katsu in some situations. But the matchups that tend to beat you, Zuri, we have a plan for. Reinforce, E-Strikes, Razor Syncs, or Double Strike Razor. I forget what I said against Zuri, but like E-Strike, Reinforce, more defensive stuff, or Double Strike. Into Guardian, we want to bring everything in, and into Azalea, we get the CNCs, the E-Strikes, and the Reinforce, or instead of the E-Strikes, the Razors and the Syncs. So, I hope that was a little easy to understand. I know I'm talking a little fast, but not a lot of people watch the long part of the video anyway, I think. From what I've seen from my analytics, people just look at, the deck list and then click off. But, oh well, what am I going to do? There's only so much I can do. I guess I could put Subway Surfers on the screen, but really I'm not complaining. I'm just happy people are clicking on the videos and checking them out. So with all that, I want to thank you all for watching. I know I talked fast here, but I just know this deck a lot. It's super easy for me to talk about. It's not like when I talk about Warrior where I do talk a little slow and think about what I'm going to say a little more, because it's not a deck that I'm super interested in or playing a ton of. It's a deck that I, practice, make the video for, so I can learn so I can learn how the deck works, and so I can know how to play against it. But a deck like Ninja or Brute that I just take a lot of time with and actually play a lot at my local events and such. I just tend to know more and I can talk more about. So hopefully next set that happens when Zen gets here, because I will definitely be playing a ton of Zen. Before I end the video, I just want to say thank you all for watching if you made it to this point. And you know, I stopped having these like end segments a lot because, you know, I feel like I just, I don't know, I look at my analytics and see that not a lot of people watch to this point, which again, I perfectly understand. People don't want to watch me ramble on with just the cards on the screen. There's definitely something more I could do. I'm just not sure what to make it a little more interesting, but oh well. Anyway, I hope you all had a good day, and I'll see you in the next one, which is either going to be Fi or Dory, probably. I don't know. We'll have to see. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.